So, just a couple of weeks ago, it felt like everybody, and I mean almost every investor in the market, was overly bullish, pretty hyper bullish on anything related to space stocks. And obviously, it was regarding the SpaceX IPO. But now that the initial hype has died down and is starting to fade, investor sentiment is becoming much more cautious. And personally, I actually think that that's a healthy thing. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I remain very bullish on the long term future for the commercial space industry because I believe companies involved in launch services, satellites, Earth observation, defense, and even lunar exploration have the potential to create tremendous value over the next decade. However, in the short term, I think investors need to exercise some type of caution. And that is because hype, it can drive stock prices well ahead of the fundamentals. And once the excitement fades, it's very common to see sharp pullbacks as traders take profits and investors begin to ask the tougher questions. So, in today's video, I want to be discussing together with me and you how investor sentiment has shifted after the SpaceX IPO excitement and why that is not necessarily a bad thing, and which space companies that I believe still deserves the attention of investors moving forward. So again, my name is David-InvestQ. If you enjoy the content, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button and tell me what it is you think about SpaceX and the space sector as a whole. Sorry, guys. My dog. She's the one that moved something real quick and knocked it over. This is Joy, by the way. So one thing I found interesting was asking, when you just search it up on Google AI or specifically prophecy, what the overall sentiment is starting to look like for the space sector. Now, what it's looking like for the sentiment now compared to 2 weeks ago, the summary basically says we've gone from widespread excitement to much more cautious restraint. And whether you agree with every point or not, I actually think it does a good job capturing what we see across the market. It highlights three major themes. First off, it's talking about the post-hype pullback. Second, it talks about the concerns surrounding potential future dilution and additional share supply. And third is, despite all of that, institutions are still appearing to be optimistic about the long-term outlook for both SpaceX and the whole market. So the first point is probably the easiest to understand with what I'm talking about, which is regarding the post-hype pullback. Because whenever you have an event that's as significant as the SpaceX IPO, money pours into the entire industry. And investors, they don't just necessarily buy the company that's in the IPO, but they also put it into the other companies in the market. But funny enough, that wasn't necessarily the case because it did appear that money was flowing out of those other individual stocks, specifically into SpaceX. And SpaceX was the only one that was moving in a hyper bullish manner in the short term during their IPO. So what it appeared to happen was money was flowing into SpaceX and it was coming out of other risk-off assets potentially and other space stocks such as Rocket Lab, Planet Labs, Black Sky, Intuitive Machines, Redwire, and several other companies because the excitement was solely concentrated on SpaceX. But now that the headlines have eventually slowed down, momentum traders began taking profits as, if I'm not mistaken, we went up to as much as $210 to $220 last week. And again, we started off at $150 and then we moved, if I'm not mistaken, it was $150 being the low. And we went all the way up to roughly $210 to $220. Let me just research it real quick. I just want to make sure I got it right. Quick reminder before we continue, if you're enjoying the content and want to connect with the community, check out the first link below for the free InvestQ community. And if you want access to advanced stock research and tools, the second link is a Prophecy 7-day trial for just $7. And last, if you want daily market updates and behind the scenes content, follow me on Instagram using the third link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. Again, so the IPO, as we know, it was listed at 135. I know that. And we started there. But then when I saw my chart open, it started off at about $150 to $160. But the IPO was at $135. And then we went as high as, let's see, 200. The 52-week high was $225.64. So that so far, as of now, is the all-time high for SpaceX. And as we reached those highs, the easy money started to disappear. The early traders took profits, and as more selling pressure took place, that added more fuel to the gas, that added more gasoline to the fire, and we just continued to plummet all the way back down to $162.37, which is where we're currently at on this trading day. Now, the second concern is none other than something we talk about a lot in other stocks, especially with Big Bear AI. Shout out to my audience members with Big Bear AI, as they helped me gain my first ever video to hit 1,000 views in less than 24 hours. So shout out to you. Thank you, as that was a very popular video. But getting back to the video, investors are beginning to think beyond the initial excitement. And they're asking certain questions like, what happens when lockup periods expire? Will any additional shares enter the market? And will insiders sell? Those are normal questions that investors should be asking, and they typically do ask after a IPO. Now, obviously, that doesn't automatically make a company a bad investment, but it can certainly impact short-term price action. And giving my personal opinion on it, and you can let me know what you think. Feel free to let me know in the comment section below and subscribe. What I think is most interesting is that despite all of this caution, the long-term story hasn't really changed. Governments are continuing to increase investments in defense, and commercial launch demand is something that is continuing to grow in demand. And satellite technologies continues expanding, and Earth observation continues becoming more valuable. And the space infrastructure as a whole is also still developing. So none of these long-term trends suddenly disappeared simply because the initial IPO surged and then pulled back down in the short-term price action. That means nothing. That has no weight regarding the initial public offering or regarding the long-term thesis for the space sector. Now, this is where I think investors make mistakes, because some people become extremely bullish during hype. And then they become extremely bearish right after the pullback happens and the hype dies down. It's crazy to me because that's never been my personal problem, as I've always been able to just separate my emotions, but I understand that's a problem for many investors. So the way that I'm looking at it is simple. I'm cautioned in the short term because prices can be disconnected from any fundamental analysis. But overall, I remain very optimistic about what this industry is heading towards and what is in store for it in the future. Now, a few companies to break down. First off, let's take a look at Rocket Lab, which is out of all the other companies, considered less speculative than something like Redwire or Lunar, Intuitive Machines, those other space companies. But nevertheless, there's still speculation around it, and it is seen as something that's very successful, but it continues to be one of the favorite publicly traded space companies out there. And they've consistently expanded their launch capabilities while also building a growing space systems business, and they're executing well. And I think execution is what matters once hype begins fading. We've talked a lot about hype. We've talked about hype fading away, but what we have to remember is that what matters the most is execution for management, and is the business growing? Just keep that in the back of your heads, guys. In fact, keep that in the front of your heads, not the back of your heads. The next company that I just wanted to cover real quick as well is none other than Planet Labs, because Planet Labs remains interesting due to the fact that they aren't simply launching rockets, because their business revolves around collecting Earth observation data that governments and commercial customers can use for agriculture, climate monitoring, defense disaster response, and many other features. And as demand for geopolitical intelligence grows, it's definitely a company worth keeping an eye on. Let's go to the next one. And again, I'm just doing a quick little summary for all these stocks, by the way, guys. I'm not doing a whole deep dive on each of them like I've done in previous videos. Check out the previous videos on other space companies if you are interested. But the next one for right now is going to be about BlackSky. BlackSky also fits into that Earth observation and defense theme, because with governments continuing to prioritize intelligence gathering and national security companies, companies that are providing real-time satellite imagery could benefit over the coming years, and execution will absolutely remain key, but the long-term opportunity is most definitely still there. Next one, Lunar, ticker symbol LUNR, but the company's name is Intuitive Machines. And Intuitive Machines is probably, I would say, is probably one of the higher risk names on the list right now. And its success is heavily dependent on continued lunar missions and commercial opportunities around the moon. And if they do continue to successfully execute, the upside could be very significant. But investors also need to recognize that mission-based companies naturally carry higher volatility. Now, last but not least, I wanted to really quick cover on none other than Redwire, because Redwire continues building exposure across multiple areas of the space economy, including manufacturing, infrastructure, and defense-related technologies. And as governments and private companies continue investing in space, they remain another interesting long-term company to have on your watch list. And then, of course, even though I was talking about SpaceX, I didn't do a quick summary on it, but I did a broader analysis talking about the hype and the end of the hype for the whole space sector. But looking at SpaceX alone and doing a quick summary on it, I would say that I don't think that anyone questions whether SpaceX is, well, actually, no, there are people that aren't questioning if it's an incredible business. I've heard people even have the opinion that SpaceX is a scam company. The debate that I'm seeing is whether expectations become too optimistic for the company following the IPO. And honestly, it's not just about if the hype, if the fundamentals can follow the hype and we can continue any bullish momentum in the near term future. I would say there are also a decent amount of investors out there that have lots of questions regarding the underlying business and whether or not, because again, I have heard this repeatedly. This is not my opinion, but it's something I've heard repeatedly with the term scam company for SpaceX. So in order to change the minds of those investors, they would have to do it by showing it through their underlying business. So where I personally stand today is I believe that the long-term investment case for the commercial space industry is very compelling. And the innovation that's taking place across multiple launch services, satellite communications, Earth observations, defense technology, and space infrastructure is unlike anything we've ever seen before. But let me know what it is you think. And because me and Joy are curious to know exactly your opinion. And so let us know in the comment section below. And also, if you do feel I added any value to your investing journey, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button, as I do appreciate the support from you guys. But with that being said, guys, David and Joy with InvestQ out. Stay safe. Keep making good decisions with your long-term portfolios. And I'll see you on the next video.